Welcome to industrial timber, where timber is not just cut, it is hauled, processed, crushed, lifted, dragged, and tested against machines built for serious work. Subscribe now if you want more heavy timber operations, dangerous forestry moments, industrial wood processing, and machines working at the edge of control. We open with an old logging truck loaded high with massive timber, pushing straight into a fast-moving river crossing. The water crashes against the wheels while the truck fights forward under a heavy stack of logs. Every bump under the surface sends the load shifting slightly, and the driver has to keep just enough momentum to avoid getting pushed sideways by the current. Too slow, and the river wins. Too fast, and the whole rig could lose balance. Somehow, the driver keeps it moving and forces the loaded truck across one of the riskiest crossings in the timber world. That scene sums up this industry perfectly. Huge weight, unstable ground, heavy equipment, and no space for careless decisions. Industrial timber work looks powerful, but behind every move is calculation. One mistake can turn a routine haul into a full recovery operation. The crew slows down and starts rethinking the cutting sequence. 3 cuts first, then rotate the section after. That is not hesitation, that is experience. In timber work, rushing is how people get hurt and machines get destroyed. A patient crew usually lasts longer than a fast one. If you are into heavy logging, giant saws, rough recoveries, and machines working in brutal places, subscribe to Industrial Timber. There is a lot more steel, timber, and controlled chaos coming. High in a tree, a worker cuts a large branch while balancing in a dangerous position. As the limb separates, it drops fast and swings through the smaller branches below. It is a simple reminder that once a cut is finished, then someone asks the obvious question. If the plan was to drop the whole tree anyway, why climb it first? Fair point. The next section of timber is already a problem before it even moves. Everyone can see that bringing it back downhill later will be a headache. Heavy wood on a slope is not just cargo. A large excavator moves in around an old stump and starts tearing through the ground. The bucket rips into buried roots, breaks compacted soil, and pulls from different angles until the stump finally starts to give way. What looks like a simple leftover piece of tree is actually a buried anchor of wood, dirt, and resistance. Only steady hydraulic force finally breaks it free. Then the mood changes for a second with a dog hanging from a branch like a tiny four-legged logger. It chews, swings, and refuses to let go, completely locked into the job like that stick owes it money. But the danger comes back fast. A loaded logging truck loses traction climbing uphill. The truck starts sliding backward, the logs shift violently, and timber spills loose down the slope. In seconds, the road becomes a danger zone. That is one of the worst failures in hauling, when the load stops being cargo and becomes a moving hazard. Then the Shearx VM series arrives and changes everything. This machine does not politely process vegetation. It attacks it. Whole trees go in, mulch comes out, and the landscape changes in a single pass. It is aggressive, efficient, and exactly the kind of machine built for serious industrial clearing. Anybody can start a chainsaw and rev it. That does not mean they understand timber work. Real saw operation means reading tension, pressure, lean, bind, and movement before the cut begins. The danger is often inside the wood before the blade even touches it. A heavy logging truck crawls along a narrow rural road with timber stacked high above the cab. The suspension compresses under the load, the truck leans through uneven ground, and every turn has to be slow. In hauling, balance matters as much as horsepower. One sudden shift can destabilize the entire rig. Then reality hits. This is not what we expected. In timber work, that usually means the job has moved from production into damage control. Before anyone checks the machine, they check the people. You okay? Matters more than any truck, saw, or load of wood. A powerful stump grinder moves into position beside a massive fallen tree. The cutting wheel bites into the wood, throwing chips across the ground while the operator sweeps side to side. Layer after layer disappears until the oversized timber is reduced to mulch. It is brute force, but controlled. That is what makes it industrial.
Ini kayu yang ketiga nih, kayu ketiga.
Further down the road, another logging truck loses control. The trailer shifts, logs break loose, and heavy timber bounces across the road like a storm made of wood and steel. 1 second, it is transport. The next, it is chaos.
Ini nanti mau turun susah ini.
A hydraulic loader lifts an extremely long log and swings it toward the trailer. The timber flexes under its own weight, one end dragging before it clears the pile. The operator adjusts slowly, because oversized logs do not forgive sloppy movement. When it finally settles onto the trailer, the scale of the load becomes obvious. At the processing line, logs move along the conveyor while workers guide them into the system. The machine feeds each section forward, sorting and handling timber in a steady rhythm. Manual control and automated handling work together, turning scattered logs into continuous production. Then a forestry forwarder fights through deep mud. The heavy machine leans as its wheels sink unevenly, the loaded rear section twisting under pressure. The operator has to work carefully because one wrong move could make the machine tip further. Soft ground does not just slow equipment down, it pulls it apart piece by piece. The recovery scene is already ugly before it begins. Deep snow around the chassis, frozen ground underneath, a truck sunk almost to the frame, and temperatures cold enough to punish every tool on site. Some recoveries look cursed from the start, and this is one of them. Then we see the small plastic wedges that surprise people outside the industry. They look harmless until they help redirect a massive tree. Tiny tools controlling giant timber sounds ridiculous until you watch it work. Luck barely saves the next situation. The falling tree clips the fence, brushes the shed, narrowly misses the vehicle, and somehow avoids becoming a total disaster. But let's be honest, it landed almost exactly where everyone feared it would. The next machine sounds brutal before it even moves. Turbo whistle, deep engine vibration, slow crawling speed, exposed components, and cooling systems fighting heat under load. Operators driving equipment like this through rough ground earn every meter. Then the footage moves back into logging history. Rivers once carried timber out of remote forests before trucks and hydraulic loaders took over. Workers guided huge floating log piles downstream using poles, ropes, boats, and experience. Log jams could form without warning, forcing men onto unstable timber to break them apart. It was dangerous, rough, and absolutely foundational to industrial timber transport. Deep in harsh forest terrain, the LKT-81 Turbo keeps dragging oversized timber through mud, slopes, and unstable ground. Normal equipment would stop. This machine keeps pulling. That mix of traction, torque, and operator skill is why forestry tractors like this still earn respect. A firefighter cuts into a massive burned tree hollowed out from the inside. The trunk still stands, but the core is already gone. Ash and sawdust fill the air while each cut weakens the shell even more. Burned trees are unpredictable, and this job is a dangerous balance between fire damage and falling timber. Logging accidents happen fast. One bad step, one shift in footing, one piece of wood moving sooner than expected, and control disappears in less than a second. That is why this work never becomes routine, no matter how many times someone has done it. This is industrial timber. Real forestry, real machine power, dangerous cuts, heavy hauling, brutal recoveries, and timber operations running right at the edge of control. Subscribe for more giant saws, heavy forestry equipment, dangerous tree work, industrial wood processing, and raw moments from deep inside the timber world. Stay sharp, trust the machine, and never underestimate gravity when the forest starts moving.